Today we are discussing the topic of paying yourself first as an entrepreneur, and this stems from the idea of being able to separate your personal and business finances. So Anton, many entrepreneurs, they struggle with the concept of separating their personal finances and from the business finances. And as a result of this, they struggle to formulate a reasonable salary for themselves, which is coined as paying yourself first. How does it work and how should they tackle this?
The average entrepreneur struggles with that, certainly initially when they're getting the business off the ground. You know, we mix our personal finances up with our business finances. When we need money, we take a little bit out, put a bit of petrol in, buy some lunch, etc. Don't always record what we're spending. And I've got a far more preferable approach from my perspective, just having seen what works in small businesses and particularly in startups, is to look at a scenario where from day one you actually decide how much money you are going to draw out of the company every month, whether it's 1,000 Rand, 500 Rand initially, 2,000 Rand, 10,000 Rand.
But a stable amount.
A stable amount, and you decide on that and you actually take that money out at the end of the month on the 25th or whenever payday would be, and you pay yourself first.
And you set up a date as well like you would when you were an employee.
Absolutely. Now, a lot of entrepreneurs out there watching this might be thinking, oh, that's not possible and it depends. Some months I can and some months I can't. And I would challenge them on that. I think if you're taking little bits and pieces out throughout the month on an ad hoc basis, and you add those up, chances are that it's going to end up being more than you would have actually said if I take a lump sum on a certain date, and that's what I take, and that is my personal income from this business that's going to tide me over or see me through until next month.
And be consistent in that. And also that helps you because whatever you do or you budget on, it's around that amount because it's fixed and it's consistent.
Correct. And I think even more so though, it's symbolic. You know, you work so hard as an entrepreneur and as the business owner and to have your own business. And what tends to happen is everybody else gets paid. The staff get paid, your suppliers get paid, you know, your service providers get paid. And if there's something left over, then maybe you'll get paid. And, you know, what kind of motivation is that for someone to actually get up and go to work and make things happen in the morning, every morning? So I suggest turning it around. Pay yourself first. Start off by saying, I'm paying myself 5 grand or 10 grand or whatever it is, and I better make sure that I've got money left over after that to pay everybody else. So maybe I'll work extra hard, or I'm more focused, or I focus on closing deals, etc., because I've got that motivation. Whereas the other way around, it's like, you know, if there's something left over at the end of it, I'll take a few crumbs for myself, is not very motivational for anybody.
So there's this buzzword which entrepreneurs, especially young entrepreneurs, they're throwing around, we slay while you sleep, which implies that they're working around the clock. So there's no time to sleep because there's this business which needs to be worked at and it has to make a profit. What do you say on that as a coach? What do you normally tell entrepreneurs?
Okay, well, I'll ask you a question, if I may. Turn the tables. How well do you function when you haven't slept the night before?
I feel like a zombie. Even coffee doesn't help.
Correct. And imagine that 3 nights on the trot, 4 nights on the trot. For those of us who've had young kids, you know, we've been there and done that with sleep deprivation and sort of burning the candle at both ends. And the reality is that you don't function well under those circumstances. So while you might feel like I need to work 16 hours a day to get this business off the ground, in reality, if you really were honest with yourself, you could probably work 8 to 10 hours a day, be just as effective, actually be more productive in the long run because you focused, you rested, you're not exhausted all the time, you're not making poor decisions because you're so tired, you're not forgetting things. You basically allow yourself to operate at a maximum efficiency, and that's, to my mind, the type of entrepreneurs that I've personally come across who are successful. Oh, they work hard, there's no doubt, but they work smart. It's a bit of a cliche, but it's true. You know, plan your day, manage your time well, after hours, switch off your phone. Nothing's going to happen that can't be resolved tomorrow. The earth's still going to turn.
Yes.
And just put some boundaries in place so that you can operate at a level that your business deserves, and not just sort of keeping your head above water all the time.
And I think we speak a lot about this in this sitting, the issue or the question of resources. So if you're saying they must plan, or for example, they must decide to work 10 days, but what about an entrepreneur who does not, or rather who is everything in the business, who's admin, who's a salesman, who is the CEO who needs to go out there and then market the company? How does that entrepreneur balance or manage their time while they have all these things to do?
Well, I think one of the biggest challenges about entrepreneurship is that you are expected to be a jack of all trades, certainly in the early days.
Okay.
When you're still setting up the business and it's sort of in its startup phase, and you're doing a bit of marketing, and and then the next hour you're doing finances, and then you're doing some admin and sending off invoices, and then you're going to a sales call, and it's part of the game, sure. But I feel like as a business starts to grow and maybe enters a sort of it starts to exit that startup phase.
Yeah.
Often as entrepreneurs, we cling to that stuff. Oh, no one can do it better than me, or I know how to prepare the accounts, or, I've got to do that because. And the truth is that we paint ourselves into a corner then, because the business can then only grow as much as our capacity allows it to do.
Yes.
How do you create growth? You create growth by bringing in resources underneath you that allow you as the entrepreneur to step up into a more strategic space, looking for opportunities.
Yeah.
And then you allow the space that's created by you moving up gets filled by other people who can support you in that growth.
Which is delegation, basically.
It is delegation, but bearing in mind, a lot of entrepreneurial or early startup, early stage businesses can't afford a lot of staff. So then the question is, so what do I do? It's all well and good to say I need a bookkeeper, but
Yes.
I can't afford someone. And again, I would challenge that, because the truth is you can get a part-time bookkeeper for R1,000 a month who
Yes.
can keep your books in order and free you up from the burden of having to try and manage that yourself, when actually you should be out doing sales.
Yes.
And driving the business and operating in a more strategic fashion. It's all sorts of things like social media, marketing. There's a whole host of tasks that can be delegated or outsourced
yes.
at a very reasonable rate, and allow you to ultimately focus on what you're good at, what keeps you interested, what makes your blood flow, and that ultimately is going to get the business moving forward as opposed to just treading water.